We also have Dr. Abiodun Ezekiel Adesini. I think I mentioned earlier. He's from Oyo. We have Dr. Yamaha Ahmad from Mina University in Nigeria. We have Cristiano Makumale, professor at Eduardo Mundlen. I mentioned that as well. I think I do see more coming in. We are indeed very privileged to have you join us. Whilst we have Mr. Biga on, I'll just talk briefly, just a minute, about the Association of African Universities, and then also invite my colleague Mami to just in a paragraph or so also just talk about Afrobarometer. The two organizations are co-organizing this very important webinar, which is marking the International Day of Education for 2026. The Association of African Universities, as most of us may be aware, is the apex continental body for higher education in Africa. We are the voice of higher education in Africa. And we work with all of you stakeholders and over 450 member universities with the goal of improving the quality of higher education. So quality in terms of access, quality in terms of harmonization, in terms of quality in terms of, teaching, learning, and research. And we have some key programs that we implement together with our stakeholders. And this would include such strategic initiatives like the Africa Centers of Excellence Initiative, which is funded by the World Bank, and we are working closely with government from various African countries in terms of creating regional centers of excellence. We also have programs like the Science Granting Councils, where we are working with Africa's Science Granting Councils across 17 countries. We also have an innovative platform called AFRID, Africa Research and Innovation Development Platform. And on that platform, it has aggregated the various research that is being produced by researchers across the continent. The idea is to make sure that our research is visible. The idea is to make sure we are creating platform for researchers to collaborate and to work together in various key thematic networks, among a host of other things that we do. We prioritize youth engagement as the Association of African Universities, and therefore work very closely with bodies like the All Africa Student Union. We have a representative from ASU joining the key panel, because we believe that the future really now, and the youth are the ones who are taking up the leadership roles, and they need to do that now. Among a host of other things. I'm sure AU is not completely new to a number of us who are connected here. I would like to just equally invite my colleague Mami Equia just in a minute, if you can also speak briefly about Afrobarometer, and hopefully by then we would have our speaker ready. Thank you so much. Over to you, Mami.
Thank you, Felicia. I think you said enough. Afrobarometer is very excited to partner with organizations like you for us to amplify the data that we have. As some of you may know, we are a Pan-African apolitical organization that strives to amplify the voices of ordinary citizens on so many topics, including corruption, democracy, education, youth, which we're very happy to share with you today. But I think my two colleagues, Mr. Biga and Ama, will be talking more about Afrobarometer in their presentations. And seeing that we're behind time, I'd just like to end it here and then invite Mr. Biga to, come on and share his remarks with us. So on behalf of Afrobarometer, I'd like to thank Association of African Universities for this collaboration. And we look forward to more of it, and to thank all our wonderful participants for joining and staying with us so far. So thank you, Felicia, and over to you, Mr. Biga.
Wow, thank you, Mami, and apologies for the technology hiccup. Thank you so much, Dr. Felicia Nkrumah Kudwadi, I'm glad to be here. Distinguished leaders of the Association of African Universities, esteemed colleagues, partners, and the youth that are shaping Africa, I say good morning to you all. It is an honor indeed, personally, but also in my capacity as the Chief Operating Officer of Afrobarometer, to join you today. At Afrobarometer, and as Mami was saying, our mission is simple but profound, to give ordinary Africans a voice in policy making through rigorous, independent, and trusted data. The voice of the people is critical to see transformation in Africa, and particularly for education, we need to listen to all actors, particularly the youth. And our theme today, which is the power of the youth in co-creating education, speaks directly to Africa's reality as the youngest continent in the world. Africa is home to the world's youngest population, a demographic reality that both presents some challenges, but from where we sit, extraordinary opportunities. The question is whether education systems are evolving fast enough, inclusive enough, and boldly enough to match the aspirations of the current generation. Ordinary. Across more than 40 African countries that we studied, Afrobarometer data shows that education is a top priority for citizens. Yet many young people see a disconnect between what they learn and the skills needed for the job market. While access to education is improving, and the data shows, gaps still persist, particularly along gender lines and also rural urban lines. Still, our data reveal the resilience and creativity and the optimism of the African youth. When policymakers, universities, and development partners listen to young people and ground reforms in evidence, education becomes more relevant and impactful. As we begin this meeting, I invite us all to commit to three things, and these are things that are on my list today. One, to elevate the voices of the youth in educational reforms. Two, grounding decisions in data and the lived experiences of people. And three, strengthening partnerships that turn evidence into action. Africa's youth are not waiting. They are actively working for change. They are driving it. They are combining their energy and using credible data and working with collaborative leadership. I believe that if we take a cue from this and involve them as much as possible, we can accelerate Africa's development and achieve the Agenda 2063. I won't talk too much at this stage. I'm sure that the data will reveal more insights. So I wish everybody well, and thank you all for inviting us, particularly the AAU. We're excited about this partnership, and we look forward to working with you in the future, but particularly for today, to some rich conversations. Back to you, Dr.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Biga, for starting us off with those critical, insightful message and remarks. We really appreciate you for joining us. Next on our program, we would move straight to inviting Professor Olushola Oyewole, who would be delivering the keynote address for today's session. Professor Olushola Oyewole is the Secretary General of the Association of African Universities. which is headquartered here in Accra, Ghana. And technology at the Federal University of Agriculture, Abeokuta in Nigeria, from where he's currently on sabbatical leave to the AAU. Prof has actually retired last year in September. He was the Vice Chancellor of the university from May 2012 to May 2017. Professor Olushola Oyewole has over 36 years experience working in the African higher education space and has over 100 scholarly public quality assurance, mobility, and scholarships at the Department of Human Resources, Science and Technology of the African Union Commission in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa. Prof indeed carries a very heavy weight in terms of what he does. He previously served as a coordinator of the British government-sponsored project on mobilization of regional initiatives for revitalization of higher education in Africa. And he has also served as a project officer of a World Bank project on quality assurance, among several others. Distinguished guest, I present to you Professor Olushola Oyewole, who would be presenting the keynote address. We are pleased to have you here, Prof. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nkrumah Kwagbeze. I will be speaking on reimagining education with youths as architects. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I bring you greetings from the Association of African Universities. We are the voice of higher education in the continent. Let me welcome our esteemed partners from Afrobarometer, our educators who are connected to this platform, policymakers, and more importantly, the brilliant and great youths of Africa who are connected to this platform today. It's really a profound honor for me as the Secretary General of the Association of African Universities to stand before you on this International Day of Education, a day that invites reflection, innovation, and action for the future of learning across our continent in Africa. The theme for this year is the power of youths in co-creating education. An African imperative is just very timely, and it's an issue that is very urgent for all of us to address. Ladies and gentlemen, for too long, educational systems in Africa have been designed without the full participation of the very young people they are meant to serve. Today, we are challenging that model. When we speak of youths as architects, we are making a radical yet simple assertion that young Africans are not passive recipients of education. They are co-creators, innovators, and designers. Therefore, they must shape curricula, the learning methods, and policies that will guide Africa into the next century. I'm very confident that by the end of this session, you will share my conviction that the future of African education will be defined by those who are shaping it now, the youths themselves. Ladies and gentlemen, let's consider the African education landscape and the youth demographics. As earlier alluded to by a previous speaker, nearly 60% of Africa's population is under 25. And projections have shown that this will rise in the coming decades. Our youths are increasingly getting urbanized, getting digitally connected, and socially conscious. Ladies and gentlemen, despite these enormous potentials, our educational system in Africa still faces some persistent challenges, such as access gaps, quality and relevance, and participation deficit. And I need to mention that young people in Africa are rarely involved in decision-making processes about the education that they receive in Africa. We need to have a rethink. The challenges are very significant in African higher education system. They include insufficient infrastructure, inequitable access, and system policy gaps. But let me also mention that the opportunities are equally profound. For example, digital technology. Young Africans are the most digitally connected generation in history. From Lagos to Kigali, youth-led tech startups are emerging every day, and we are so proud of our young people. Another important opportunity that I need to mention is the capacity for innovation. African youths are creating solutions for local problems, from agricultural apps in Ghana to mobile health education in Kenya. These are things that we need to be proud of in Africa. I also want to note that according to Afrobarometer, our youth in Africa are more informed, more socially conscious, and they are more willing to participate in governance and institutional reforms when they are given the opportunities to do it. Ladies and gentlemen, what we are talking about now is not strange. Youths as architects of the higher education that they are offered. In studies that have been carried out, it has been found out that when our young people are involved in developing the curriculum for their education, it has led to some very positive outcomes. For example, it's been found out that it has led to improved learning outcomes, it has promoted innovation and creativity, and then our youths have become more responsive to the environment in which they are involved in. So, ladies and gentlemen, what we are saying is this: we need to engage our youths in developing the education that they are exposed to. There are some practical strategies for involving our youths, practical strategies for co-creating higher education with youths as architects. And very quickly, I will share with us those strategies that have been found to be working, which we need to attract or encourage in our various institutions. For example, our youth can become architects or co-creating architects in our education system in the following ways. We can establish structured co-creation platforms. So they don't really need to be in the boardroom before they can contribute to the curricula. Universities and institutions should create formal structures that enable students to participate in curriculum design, governance, and program development. This has been happening in some institutions. For example, we have co-creation labs at the University of Cape Town, where students and faculty collaborate on module design and experiential learning programs. These are things that we need to emulate. Number two, let us build the capacity of our youth for meaningful participation in the educational programs. Our youths need skills and knowledge to contribute effectively as co-creators. These include understanding what curriculum development really is, what research methods are, and they also need to be groomed in the area of leadership and digital literacy. I believe that we need to organize training workshops or mentorship programs that will make our youths to be able to participate meaningfully. The third thing that we need to do to make our youth to become architects or co-creating architects of the educational system is that let us leverage digital technology and innovation. Digital tools can enable students to co-design courses, contribute to research, and collaborate across institutions, especially where physical access is limited. My number 4 proposal is that we need to integrate experiential learning and community engagement in our activities. Co-creation is more effective when students link theory to real-world practice through experiential learning and simple projects. Some examples are already available. In Nigeria, we have what is called Youth for Change initiatives, where students are allowed to co-create social innovation projects addressing local challenges. This is a model that we can adopt. We also have community-based research programs in Ghana, where students design and implement studies that inform policy or improve local services. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm mentioning these examples because it's very important that this message get across Africa, get to all our institutions in Africa. Number 5, we can promote collaborative research and innovation hubs. Students should actively participate in research projects that address local and continental challenges. This will foster a sense of ownership and innovation in our young people. Number 6, let us foster inclusive and equitable participation. Co-creation must reflect Africa's diversity, including gender, socio-economic background, region, and ability. We must avoid privileging a narrow segment of our young people. All of them can be involved in this. Number 7, we should institutionalize youth co-creation policy in our various institutions for creation that will involve the young people to be sustainable. It must be embedded in institutional governance and national educational policy. I hope our policymakers are listening and they will connect to this. Number 8, let us create feedback loops for continuous improvement. Creation is interactive. Institutions must establish mechanisms for monitoring, evaluation, and feedback in order to refine the progress better. I believe that the message you are passing across today is resonating. But let me also mention that efforts in the past in Africa we've met with some challenges that has made co-creation to be a little difficult. For example, we've had experiences of institutional resistance to change. Many institutions find it difficult to change. We've also noticed that many of our young people lack capacity and skills for co-creation of curricula and other engagement in our higher education purpose. We need to empower them. We also need to mention that co-creating higher education with youths as actors will involve some funding for capacity building. Unfortunately, funding also for educational resources. Many institutions do not have this type of fund. I will also mention that one of the challenges that we face is that of the diversity of the perspectives of our young people themselves. Many of our young people are not, the youth of Africa, they are not a monolithic group. There are differences in their socio-economic background, gender, region, and ability can complicate consensus building in co-creation. This is a big challenge, which I believe is not so big for us not to overcome. I also need to mention that there's a need. One of the challenges how to balance academic standards with innovation. Faculties quite often worry that student design curricula or innovation could compromise academic rigor and standards. Conversely, our young people may feel constrained by traditional academic frameworks. We can also overcome this. I will also mention that we also have some cultural and generational barriers. For so many years, our universities and higher education institutions are used to the teacher talking that to the students. They've not been there. Many of them are not used to a program that is led by the learner. We need to go back or promote learner-centered learning. Learner-centered teaching and learning in the African system. There are many other challenges that needs to be constrained, including the policy and regional frameworks that is very important for us to be able to engage our youth as co-creators of our educational process. Ladies and gentlemen, you may be wondering why we are saying all these things. We are saying that co-creation of higher education with youth as actors is a visionary and transformative approach, but it's not without its own challenges. Researchers have shown that success depends on the following: institutional willingness to change and share, capacity building for our young participants, adequate resources and infrastructures that will empower our young people, inclusive processes that will consider the diverse perspective of our young people. We also need to balance innovation with academic rigor, and we also need to address the cultural and generational barriers. Ladies and gentlemen, we can overcome these challenges. We can, since education is meant for these young people, since these young people are now innovative, they can contribute to the curricula that we help them to develop. So I'm making a call to action. The future of African education depends on our willingness to share power with our young people. So policymakers, this message is for you. Universities, let us establish advisory councils, innovation labs, and co-creating committees within the university system. Our civil societies and partners like Afrobarometer, they are welcome. We need you to supply us with data that will encourage our policy change. Ladies and gentlemen, I also need to speak to our young people themselves. Please, young people, let us take ownership. Let us continue to be innovative. Let us speak up so that the world can hear you. Co-create your education. Use this opportunity to build up your future. In concluding, ladies and gentlemen, I want to mention that when we empower young Africans as architects of their own future, we are not just improving education, we are transforming our societies, we are transforming our economies, and we are transforming our future. I'm looking forward to this happening all over Africa. Let me say this clearly, that I am proud of our young people. African youths hold the blueprint for the continent's future. We need to listen to them. We need to engage them. We need to with them. And with this, we are going to build an higher education system that is inclusive, innovative, and I will say, proudly Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, can you just pause a little and dare to imagine that education system where our young people are co-creators, not excluding the academia, but sitting together, evaluating the education system, delivery that they've received, and telling us areas where they can be improved. Beloved, when we do this, you'll be reimagining the future of Africa, an Africa that is great, an Africa that is built by the young people in our continent. Thank you very much for listening. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Professor Olusola. That was a very powerful address. And as you were delivering it, most of us were taking notes. We thank you so much for the time taken to prepare this and to share. He did mention that there's no problem that we cannot overcome, but we just have to work together as stakeholders to overcome them. And he says the future is now and the youth are engaged now. So it's not really about preparing the youth for the future, but we really need to engage them closely in as programs at our institute. Thank you so much, Prof. I think when it gets to the question and answer session, we'll have the opportunity to also contribute and to engage Professor Oyewole more closely. In the interest of time, we'll move straight to our next session. And this is the panel discussion. There's a high-level panel discussion that we have. Today's panel is really moving us from why youth participation matters to how leading us in this discussion. I would like to briefly introduce them humanities at Xavier University of Louisiana. She was a fellow of the Institute of International Education Scholar Rescue Fund, hosted at the University of California State, Barbara, where she was made the Tipson Distinguished Professor in the Department of Religious Studies.
Sorry, Felicia.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, but we have to have Amma's presentation first, then the panelists will come in.
Oh, yes, that is right. So, yes, you are right, Mami. Maybe let's have Amma come on next. And Amma would be the one who would be presenting the data from Afrobarometer. Amma, if you are here, let's receive your presentation. Is Amma ready to come on?
Yes, Amma is ready now.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Thank you, Doc. I was not able to unmute for some time. And thank you everyone once again for joining us. And wow, Prof. Oyewole, thank you so much for your keynote. I mean, it was so informative. It's it's a tough presentation to follow, but thank you so much for the information that you shared with us. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone, depending on where you're joining us from. My name is Amma. I'm an administrative assistant with Afrobarometer, and today I have the honor of presenting our findings on youth and education. Mami, can you please confirm if I'm supposed to share from my end or if you would share from yours?
Amma, please share from your end.
Okay, all right, I'll do that. Just a second. Okay, can you please confirm if you can see my screen?
Yes, we
Yes,
can, Amma.
but you need to put it in presentation mode.
Yes, I'll do that just now. Okay, is that visible?
Great, that's awesome. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So I'll begin with just giving a brief introduction to Afrobarometer and what we do. Mr. Abiga and Mami have already sort of given us a little insight as to what we do. So I'll just be briefly adding on to that. So Afrobarometer, like Mami and Mr. Abiga mentioned, is a Pan-African non-partisan survey research network, and we provide data on African experiences and evaluations of democracy, governance, and quality of life. We do this so that the views and then the needs of the African citizens are what are reflected when our policymakers are taking their decisions on the African continent. So 10 survey rounds have been completed since 1999. Round 10 surveys were conducted in 38 countries between January 2024 and September 2025. So in total, by September 2025, Afrobarometer had conducted more than 280 surveys with nearly 440,000 respondents across 45 African countries. Now, when you take a look at the map, you can see the progress of the work that we have done since 1999, with just a couple of countries in round 1 to over 40 countries now in round 10. But unfortunately, you can see the areas shaded in gray, we've not been able to conduct any surveys there yet due to some reasons, which include political reasons and others. When it comes to our methodology, Afrobarometer uses a nationally representative sample of adult citizens, which to us are people who are 18 years and above. We conduct face-to-face interviews in the language of the respondent's choice because we believe that we should be able to give them the opportunity to have the confidence to reflect their opinions in a language that is comfortable for them to use. Our standard questionnaire allows comparisons over countries and over time, and our sample sizes of 1,200 to 2,400 yield country level results with margins of sampling error of plus or minus 2 to 3 percentage points. All right, so now I'll dive straight into the presentation, and I'll begin with this section on education as a policy priority. So here we'll be looking at how African citizens view the importance of education as compared to other issues on the continent. Margins of sampling error of plus or minus 2 to 3 percentage points. All right, so now I'll dive straight into the presentation, and I'll begin with this section on education as a policy priority. Is there feedback? Looking at Please, am I audible? I thought there was a bit of feedback there. Yeah.
Yes, you are audible. Please go ahead.
All right. Okay, thank you so much. So I'll just go on to the next slide, and then we can see how Africans view education on the list of important policies that they think their government should address. So across 38 countries, Africans view education as the third most important priority that they think that their government should address, following only health and unemployment. But education does tie with other issues like increasing cost of living, infrastructure or roads, and water supply. Again, if government was to increase expenditure on things that will help the youth, Africans believe that education should be the second most important thing that government should spend on, only trailing job creation, but then trailing job creation admittedly by a very wide margin. As you can see, 48% of respondents did list job creation as their topmost priority, and then 16% listed education. Now, in this section, I'll be looking at the current conditions in education and employment with regards to African youth to really get a sense of the correlation or lack thereof between education and employment for the youth on the African continent. Right, so 18% of respondents reported having post-secondary education as their highest level of education. As a similar proportion, as 16%, reported having no formal education at all. And majority of the respondents, 39%, reported having secondary schooling as their highest level of educational attainment. And 26% of respondents reported having primary schooling as their highest level of educational attainment. And the statistics differ when we come to the demographic groups, and we can see that women, the poor, and people in the rural areas tend to be most disadvantaged when it comes to educational attainment. But overall, younger Africans do have higher education as compared to their elders. But we can see from this slide that while younger Africans have attained higher formal educations as compared to their elders, they are still the ones who are more likely to be unemployed. So in fact, from 40 to 45% of African youth said that they are unemployed and actively seeking work. And when it comes to the barriers to youth employment, African youth lists lack of adequate training and lack of experience as the top two barriers facing them. Now, in this section, we'll be looking at public education as it pertains to gender specifically. So only 13% of Africans believe that girls are prevented from attending school because their families prioritize the education of boys. But the statistics for this differ from countries, and it goes to as high as 28% in Cameroon and 27% as well in Malawi. Now, in this slide as well, we can see that 27% of Africans believe that girls face discrimination, harassment, or requests for sexual favors from their teachers. But again, the figures do differ. So when you go to Gabon, you can see that as many as 71% of Gabonese people hold this view. In Cameroon as well, as many as 55% of respondents hold this view as well. But conversely, fewer than 1 in 10 Africans in Madagascar and Mauritius hold a view that girls face discrimination and harassment in school. Now, in this slide, we can see that Africans do believe that girls who become pregnant should still be allowed to stay in school. They believe that those girls still have the right to education, with an overwhelming majority of 43% strongly agreeing with this view. And in this final section, we'll be taking a look at government performance with regards to education. So we can see clearly from this slide that 50% of African citizens believe that their governments are performing fairly or very well when it comes to education, but another 50% reports that their governments are actually performing poorly. And the figure goes as high as to an overwhelming majority of 84% in Zambia, and 81% in Tanzania, but then as low to less than 1 in 3 people in Angola, Chad, Nigeria, and Congo Brazzaville. So to conclude, Afrobarometer findings show that young Africans are outpacing their elders in educational attainment, and most citizens say it is now rare or unheard of for girls to be prevented from attending school because their families prioritize boys' education. Again, most Africans support the right to education for pregnant girls and adolescent mothers and believe that schools should teach sexuality education to help young people make informed decisions. Also, disadvantages persist for girls and women as well as for rural residents and the poor. And African youth identify inadequate training and a lack of required experience as a leading barriers to youth employment. Again, only half of Africans report satisfaction with their government's performance on education, while the other half demand more. And finally, education ranks high on citizens' list of priorities for government action. And that brings me to the end of my presentation, but we do encourage you to visit the Afrobarometer website and explore our research publication and our online data analysis tool as well. Thank you all so much, and over to you, Doc.
And thank you very much, Amma. That was a very powerful presentation. I mean, data doesn't lie. The statistics are always good in terms of helping us know what is happening on the ground so that as stakeholders, we can better plan for the future. Displayed on the screen is the QR code to both English and French reports of the research reports that Amma just presented on. I think we can just leave it on for a second or so, and we are encouraging all stakeholders to scan and to access it, to download and to read it. We'll also share it with you via email as we share the presentations and other documents from this session. So thank you very much. Yeah, that was very insightful. There's a lot going on, and it's really also good to know that African governments seem to be prioritizing education, but there's a lot more that we need to do in terms of, assigning the percentage of GDPs that we had all committed to assigning to research, which we are not there yet. And also the statistics in terms of most stakeholders being of the opinion that girls who are pregnant should still be able to continue with their education. That's very good. So thanks so much for these insights. I think there will be opportunity during the panel discussion for the panelists to highlight specific aspects and to engage with the findings that you shared. This is very useful to our community of researchers as we undertake various research. It will be good to reference this Afrobarometer data and statistics to support the case that we'll be making in those papers. Thanks so much. Next, I think we can move to the next item, but I think that I really followed the presentation closely and it's quite powerful, as have also been pasted via the chat. Amazing presentation, Amma, great presentation, excellent ideas, and count from what the youth say, the way they feel it. So there's really voices from the masses, voices from the ground. Thanks so much. Next on the agenda, would move to the panel discussion. I think I started off introducing the panel and what we'll be engaging with closely, and also move to introduce the first panelist, Professor Elizabeth Ayuetan, who is a visiting associate professor of environmental humanities at Xavier University of Louisiana. Prof holds a PhD in Black women's writing and ecofeminism from the University of Yaoundé, Cameroon. She's a recipient of several awards, among which are the African Women Development Fund, Education Policy Initiative, and she is also a founding member of the Women in Higher Education Network, which is hosted by the Association of African Universities. Before moving to take up the fellowship, which I referenced earlier, she was the chair of the Department of English at the University of Buea in Cameroon for almost half a decade. Prof, we see you. Thank you so much. It's an honor to have you connected.
Thank you, Felicia. Thank you so much. And it's a pleasure for me to be here.
Thanks for joining us, even though I know it's very early where you are, around 4 a.m. or so. It's really an honor to have you join us. And next, we have Miosepi Matang. She would mention her name properly when she comes on. She's a lawyer and a social entrepreneur dedicated to driving youth development, education reform, and human capital growth across Africa. She's a co-founder of Youth Impact, one of the largest NGOs dedicated to scaling health and education programs. Headquartered in Botswana, the organization has reached over 500,000 young people across 10 countries. She's a board member of the Prize, an organization that funds early stage ventures driving proven solutions. So can we see you? Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much. Great to be here. Thanks.
Great. Next, we have a representative from the All Africa Students Union in the person of Divine Edem Kojode. He is a resource-driven professional and a student leader with over a decade of experience in education policy, youth advocacy, strategic communications, and governance. He's currently pursuing the ACCA professional qualifications at the University of Professional Studies here in Accra, Ghana, and an LLB at the University of London. Divine has held several senior leadership roles, including president of the Alexander Edum Kopon JCR and co-founder of the Legon Student Institute for Policy Studies. We are talking about African youth voices, and therefore it's very important that we have the youth represented, and youth who have been leaders in terms of championing institutions like the All Africa Student Union. So Divine, good to have you here. We are indeed privileged to have you join us. Sorry,
Thank you. Thank you very much, Felicia, and good morning, good afternoon to all of us present, and special regards to Prof.
Thank you very much. Finally, we have Fumi. And Fumi is a South African. Fumi is the CEO, Fumi Koba, of Closet Club, which is a South African fashion tech company. And they use technology to turn closets into income. So she's joining us from the entrepreneurship angle. And their mission is really to build micro businesses through circular fashion, reduce waste, and create side income opportunities for young people. As we all agree, there's the whole issue of unemployment, and therefore entrepreneurship is highly encouraged and center staged. They are developing AI-powered tools that make reselling and renting clothes fast, safe, and community-driven. She has to her about various recognitions: Best Female Tech Startup in Africa 2023, Google for Startup Funding Investment 2024, and G20 Tech Startup Finalist. Thank you so much, Fumi. If you can kindly say hello and maybe mention your name so I get it correctly.
Hi, everyone. It's Pumi. So happy to be here.
Okay. So maybe just to kickstart the discussion right away, when we talk about co-creating systems, we are really, it just helps for us to understand what exactly do we mean by bringing on board the African youth. And as we also know, this can easily become a slogan, co-creation, it's being highlighted across. But from your various perspective based on where you sit, youth advocacy, innovation system, and then from higher education scholarship, since we have an academic here with us. What really distinguishes genuine co-creation from the symbolic participation? It's not enough that there's an event happening and we say, let's invite ASU to join so that there's a representative in the room. What really should co-creation be in the real sense of us wanting to, achieve the impacts that we should benefit from co-creation? Is it about decision-making power? Is it really about institutional culture? Is it about incentives? Or what exactly does it boil down to? If we can have some brief remarks, perhaps we can start with Divine, and then we go around the room as well.
Well, thank you very much. I think the right place to start is to admit, as you said, that honestly co-creation has become one of those words that everyone likes, but very few institutions and organizations actually practice meaningfully. And so for us as young people, the real question is not whether young people are present in the room, because increasingly young people are present. The question for us is about whether the presence of young people is consequential and about whether the right avenue has been created for the voice of young people to be consequential in these spaces. And so for me, the difference between genuine co-creation and symbolic participation comes down to three things. First, the power, and the process, and then the proof. First, power. Why power? Because genuine co-creation exists only when young people have been given defined decision-making influence, not advisory roles that disappear into meeting minutes, conference reports, and what have you, but real authority. And so when it comes to committee, young people having voting rights on committees, for instance, when it comes to decision-making structures, sometimes allowing young people to co-chair such structures. Or even if we cannot do those two, give them clear points in the decision-making chain where the input of young people can really alter, or improve outcomes, if you may. And so that to me is about the first, which has to do with giving young people the power and giving them the defined decision-making influence, the power to be able to make real impact. Then second has to do with the process. Symbolic participation normally happens at the end when decisions are already formed and then young people are invited to go through and then react. But as I said earlier, if we are talking about genuine co-creation, then it should begin much earlier. And that is why we talk about the process. It should begin at the problem definition stage. And so what problem are we trying to solve? What are the outcomes we are looking at? What trade-offs are acceptable? And we believe that when young people are involved from that stage where problems are defined and the pathways to solving those problems are created, then the engagement of young people in the co-creation process becomes very meaningful and not symbolic. Then the third, as I said earlier, is the proof. So institutions that take co-creation seriously can definitely show a visible trail of youth input in whatever they have created. So when you have said that young people are co-creators of this policy or that policy or this project or that project, you need to be able to say as an institution, what did the young people propose? What did the students propose? Were those proposals adopted? Were they adopted but with a little refinement? Were they not adopted, and why were they not adopted? And so this is the kind of transparency that builds, trust and signals respect for young people and makes co-creation more meaningful and not symbolic, because without it, then the participation of young people feels, extractive. And so I think institutions need to embrace the culture to share power, without fear, and to move beyond the cosmetic, involvement of young people and just calling it co-creation. So to answer your question, I think that co-creation is not just about young people being present, but about them being consequential. And this is where we can really tell whether it has become one of those things that have become a cliche or people really mean it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You did say something which really stood out, relating to the fact that institutions should be willing and ready to share power and to engage youth right from the start. I would like to then cross over to Prof. Elizabeth Etan, just to ask, at a typical African university or at a typical, university level, how do you project, or how should we envision co-creation through our everyday work? Whether through, development of course programs, through various processes as pertains in an African institution.
Thank you so much, Felicia, and thank you, Afrobarometer. Thank you, AAU team, for having me on this platform. I really appreciate the keynote address. Thank you so much, Professor Olushola. That was really, really informative. I think that is an advocacy, and I appreciate the passion with which we try to talk about co-creation in our African higher education system or African education or involvement of youth. I really appreciate this. Coming from the academia, I see co-creation as an inclusive and collaboration approach in curriculum design, in our teaching philosophy, and even in assessment, where students' engagement and participation are primordial. I will start by saying, so in genuine co-creation, students are active participants and not only consumers or beneficiaries, but they are supposed to be active participants. So I will take myself, for instance, in the classroom. I see myself not as a source of knowledge, but as an interment of empowerment and self-discovery. Usually in lectures, I act more as a prompter, inspirer, moderator, and facilitator. Why do we do this? It's true, you will say, as teachers, we do all of this without discarding somewhat the traditional role of a teacher as a knowledgeable instructor. But however, I fervently adhere to interactive student-centered activities. So student engagement, maybe through class discussions, seminar models, will greatly influence outcome. You just asked if it's about decision-making, power, institution, culture, incentive. Okay, but I think it's a combination of restructuring decision-making, rebalancing power dynamics, and transforming institutional culture. Why do I say this? I say this because most of our institutions, especially in Africa, there is that power dynamics and there's that dichotomy between the teacher and the student. So one of the things that Afrobarometer and even the whole idea of co-creation is bringing to us is to bring everybody, bring in an inclusive collaborative approach whereby students should be part of drawing the curriculum. But how does this work? Could we just take our curriculum and put out there and say students should come and contribute? No, it doesn't work that way. We have to create those platforms. We have to bring in, it takes a lot. We need resources. We need to build that platform. We even need to take maybe the students' leaders, people whereby we could even pass through this curriculum. But once this is inbuilt in our teaching philosophy and in the course of reviewing our curriculum, I think this is going to be part and parcel of the co-creation that we are thinking of. I also look at co-creation should involve diverse stakeholders in decision making. It also requires a shift in power, whereby youth should be active participants with a bottom top model, which means we also have to bring them. And from what we know from the community and even from the students, so we take it from our needs. When we look at the niche, then we are able to design this. So there should be a shift from organizational stoicism, that's passive involvement, to collaborative or active involvement. And once this is done, I think co-creation will be something that we all will be proud of. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Prof. For those insightful contributions. I'm sure when we have the opportunity for stakeholders to engage as well, would love to hear from them, at a typical African universities. Knowing how things currently are, together with all the challenges. Sometimes there are some bureaucracies or there are some strict setup, way of doing things, and it's a bit difficult to change things a little bit. We'd like to hear what you think should be the best approach if we want to improve the current rate at which we engage the youth in a co-creative manner. So they are not only being invited to participate, because as Divine did mention, there's been enough of participation. Let's invite them to be in the room. But now we want to move to the actual co-creation in the real sense of the word. Would also like to then cross over to Botswana and invite in Musefi to contribute to the discussion. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Felicia. And let me just pass on my gratitude to the organizers for this important discussion, and greetings to my panelists. So let me first start by sharing that I am speaking from the NGO perspective, particularly, the role that NGOs play in education is crucial, as training young people, ensuring that they can be able to be equipped with the right skills such that they could accelerate in whatever that they dream and they wish to happen. So in Botswana in particular, we are working in the primary education space in partnership with the Ministry of Education to scale an intervention that focuses on targeting instruction according to a child's learning ability, using really fun and cost-effective learning materials. And we are now rolling it out to the whole country, and we're hoping by the year we reach our national scale. But in that journey, one thing to note is when we talk about co-creation, is as Divine, mentioned around articulation of a defining goal. I believe that is important, because if you want to scale an initiative or even implement, one thing that you think will create that change, the idea is to have a really, defined and clear outcome. And I think the big one that I would say when I think about co-creation, one is the willingness to learn, and also recognizing that young people, they're not just, the receivers or beneficiaries of education, but actually producers of knowledge. Young people who are already in schools, who are either students, they know what works. And also what needs to be reimagined. How can we do things differently? And I think it requires institutions and various governments and policy and decision makers to listen, and really ensuring that we can be able to listen and act on what needs to be done. So I think the first one, is important, that we have the willingness to learn, and a willingness to be able to appreciate what has worked before and how can we adapt it to make it better. The second one is we know that learning is alone is not enough. And I think what distinguish, genuine co-creation is the willingness to change, right? So first is appreciating, what we know and what we can do better, but also the willingness to change. And I think we need to look into our policies around education. And, when the Afrobarometer data was shared, they were telling us a story about perceptions of young people. And particularly, one that was interesting was around, the pregnancy, in the sense of, how do various countries, perceive if one, was pregnant, would they be able to gain back into schools? And I think that's a very interesting thing because it's around perception, and many countries will have policies that are in place, but the next person on the street wouldn't know that these policies exist to say, if one has given birth, they can be able to re-enter back into schools. So I think we need to think about, what are we defining as that change in terms of policies, our curriculum, the way we assess and we run assessments, and even as Divine mentioned earlier on about the power structures. And I think, youth perspective, us as young people, we, just do not create the possibility of, that institutional transformation. And our participation shouldn't just remain symbolic. So I think we need to be the ones really, driving that conversation as young people to say, what do we need to unlearn? And I think also similarly, with institutions thinking about what do we need to unlearn if we really want youth to be at the forefront of education. What do we need to do differently, and what do we need to change such that our institutions and our young people are meeting, the demands for this generation. Another example I could give is around the role of technology. We know that technology, AI, and digitization, the conversations are now progressive. And looking at where we are going, we need to look at where we are in terms of our institutions and ways in which our institutions are equipped to be able to meet the changing demands. So, and it goes back to, again, accepting first, are we willing to learn, in terms of what are the trends, what's next? But the second thing is, are we willing to change? Are we willing for our, where we are sitting in our different, education sectors, are we willing to change and embrace the new times? So I think that's a really, important, posture when I think about co-creation. And I do think, it comes with a sense of really, having that inherent belief that co-creation does begin with young people, and institutions have a role in facilitating that to happen. So just those would be my reflections around this very interesting question. Thank you.
Thank you so much. There's something you said which was also highlighted in the keynote address about the willingness of institutions to change. So that's a very important aspect. You also did mention the need for us to engage, stakeholders more widely, even at the policy level. And those are very critical in terms of if we really want to co-create in the real sense of the word as we are all promoting, then that's very important. Also the aspect about listening and acting. And this very important platform is creating one of such engagement sessions where we get to listen and where we get to also engage. But most importantly, when we do return back to our own institutional level at our own small corner, what are the key ways, key strategic ways that we should ensure that we are really taking forward co-creation in a more strategic manner. Next, maybe because curriculum co-creation did come up in the discussion, would like to hear from a youth voice, and an aspect related to policy alignment. So I'll be coming to you, Divine. I don't know if you are there. Just to say that from the data that we received from Afrobarometer, it really shows some disconnect between education and employability. As we all do know, employability has been a critical issue that still tend to confront Africa, as well as even civic engagement. There's that disconnect between education, employability, and civic engagement. So from the perspective of African students, where does this disconnect show up most sharply in our curriculum today? And what practical model have you seen or would you propose for embedding student voices systematically into curriculum design without necessarily compromising academic standards?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. Quite frankly, the Afrobarometer data is very sobering. But it is not entirely surprising to the African student because from the perspective of African students who always engage with their senior colleagues who would graduate and complain about the lack of jobs, and what you hear from industries that there is a disconnect, we are not surprised at all. But the disconnect between education and employability and civic engagement shows up very sharply in three areas of the curriculum. And first has to do with the dominance of theory without structured application. Many students graduate knowing about things, but not knowing how to do them. They have, for instance, studied policy, at the undergraduate level, for instance, or at the graduate level. They have read about policy, but they have never, for instance, written a policy brief. They have studied economics, but they have never, practically analyzed a real budget. And so the qualifications accumulate, but the capability lags behind. Then, second has to do with the weak alignment with the changing labor market realities. And it is because curricula often move too slowly for sectors that are evolving rapidly. So, for instance, the trend of digitalization of public services, fintech, the climate economy, AI-enabled work, etc., etc. Even where courses exist, they can be somewhat overly outdated and overly abstract. And so this leaves students very, educated intellectually, but practically unprepared. And then the third has to do with the marginalization of civic and leadership formation. And the decline in civic engagement is not accidental. It is because education has prioritized examinations over and over again over agency, over critical thinking. We produce graduates who are very credentialed, but disengaged from public life. Sometimes in most of our universities, people even frown upon students who would want to go into leadership by telling them that why don't you focus on your books, as though the two were mutually exclusive. And so the disconnect is not just about the jobs, it's about whether education really prepares young people to function as workers and, most importantly, to function as citizens and leaders wherever they find themselves. Now to your second question, how do we embed student voice into curriculum design without compromising academic standards? And on this, I would want to be very clear. I think co-creation does not necessarily mean that students must determine academic content on their own. What it means is that there must be structured partnership with clearly defined roles. And so, for instance, you could have a student faculty, curriculum design cycle. So at the institutional level, you could have a board that has a small number of trained student representatives. Because when we talk about co-creation, we are not just talking about putting any student there at all. There must be trained, student representatives. And there must also obviously be the academic advisors, academic leads, faculty, people, and all of that. Then, very importantly, someone from industry. And then lastly, maybe a quality assurance or academic planning officer. And so if you adopt such a framework, if you adopt an example of such a framework, what happens is that it keeps the process, focused, where the role of students of that particular committee or board is very clearly defined, so that the standards are not diluted, but also strengthened. And so these standards and frameworks must be set that really put out there in clear language what the concrete role of students are in these processes. Thank you very much.
Okay, just to come in before you leave, mention the fact that sometimes students don't even have hands-on experience as far as writing policy briefs and generating some key documents are concerned. What role do you think a body like the All African Students Union can play in terms of helping students acquire such hands-on skills?
And so at the All Africa Students Union, we have 7 strategic priorities. The first and foremost, obviously, is education, advocacy, and students' rights. But our second most important is about capacity building, where in our own little way, with the limited resources we have and with the partnerships we have, we engage students across the continent on building their capacity to be able to, first of all, advocate, second, contribute concretely to policy making. And so I'll give you an example, and our colleagues at AAU are aware that ASU sits on the advisory board of the harmonization of the Hacker Initiative, for instance. Last year, over a period of about 6 months, we engaged in a series of training sessions, for example, for student quality assurance ambassadors. And so for a very long time, we had been advocating for student representation on quality assurance committees and boards. But the question that arose was, are the students equipped to be able to sit on those boards and contribute anything meaningful? And so what we at ASU did was to engage with organizations like the AAU, OBREL, and other organizations, DAT, etc., to be able to come up with a program, a short program, where we trained students across the continent on quality assurance frameworks, on what their roles should be on quality assurance boards, on how they could advocate, etc., etc. And so student organizations like the All Africa Students Union have a role to play in equipping students. But we've also got to understand that our capacity is limited, and we can only get to do that with a partnership of organizations like the AAU. So we at ASU have been leading the way in partnering with the organizations with the capacity and wherewithal to be able to help us train our colleagues, to be able to advocate better and represent students better on such very important decision-making committees.
Thank you. Okay, so now I'll move to Fumi. Good to have you here, award winner, and good to have you join us from industry. Just 2 questions for you. Innovation systems often move faster than formal education systems, as you would know. So from your work in innovation and system design, what lessons can universities learn from entrepreneurial and community-based models about co-creating relevant skills that can foster student employability? How can institutions really integrate entrepreneurial mindsets, problem solving, and systems thinking across disciplines, not only in business, but or tech programs? Because mostly there is a special program at the institution level that is that students have to undertake, maybe titled entrepreneurship or so. Entrepreneurship 101, and then after that, that is the end. What practical step do you think institutions should take, higher education institutions should take? Yeah, over to you.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to be speaking about just from a outside of university, based on what we have witnessed just from graduates entering the innovation system. So I think what's really important, and there's been lots of points that were raised about, reducing the bureaucracies and give the students the freedom to be able to experiment. And the reality is, in the real world, skills stick with responsibility and not just assessments. And in the startup community, people learn by trying it out, testing, failing, fixing, and whatever fails that you did, there's accountability for that, and those accountabilities lead to real outcomes, and you almost feedback immediately. And when you have all these bureaucracies happening, bureaucracy is the mother of killing speed, so that reduces innovation in a way. And where universities could learn is, or what we found is, with universities, they often separate like learning with experimentation. So there is the books versus the doing, and they reward, if you know your books really, really well, you reward it on the theory, but not so much on the execution, and what this does for the students that we see coming out straight from university, it almost delays them from real life problems because they have never dealt with it, because they've been constantly awarded on, you got a 75% or 95% based on the theory that you have learned from your books. So I think the marriage of there is still quite disconnected. And I think also what you see when you come into that innovative space is that cross disciplines in interact together. For example, we are a tech business, but our product is fashion, and within that we've got logistics partners, and within that we've got payment gateways, we've got all sorts of other departments that work together in order to produce one product. What we found is often is universities tend to work in silos. So the tech students will work here, the marketing students would work here, the fashion designers have got a completely different campus, so they have no form of cross-pollination when it comes to skills, and that also helps. It really staggers the progress when it comes to that, and in the real world, the reality is there's no labels as to what you're doing. When you work in a startup, trust me, you could have studied marketing, but you'll probably be running logistics that you have never been able to know about when you are when you're in university. And I think what a lot of people think, what happens, there is a thing that whether you're employed or not, we all assume that entrepreneurial mindset is something, it means just because you want to start a business, but that is really not true. An entrepreneurial mindset could be applied whether you're working or whether you're starting your own business, because those are the skills to problem solve, to adapt, to take ownership. Those are the skills that you kind of need to take with you regardless of your employment status. And I think where universities could learn is just partner just within universities. I think if we stop with working as silos and then we partner and cooperate between different projects within university, take your design students and take them to the tech labs so that they can understand what is happening. Take your tech students and put them into the marketing lab, and so that they can understand what is required. Because what we're finding is, especially with startups like me, small companies like myself, is we start to look for tools where we do not have to hire 5 different people with 5 different salaries. We look for tools that are able to cover all those 5 different skills. And we kind of you need to know a little bit of something in order for, you don't have to be a master of one. I think that's also like a bit of a death in these days. But if you can be really good across 5 different skills, I think you become way more valuable and way more powerful than your other peers. So cross-pollination between the different skills and the different disciplines is super, super important. And I think universities can add a bit more partnerships across themselves as it is now.
Well, what would typically be your advice to a youth who is connected here listening and talking about the need for people to acquire more skills than perhaps, normally someone would say, I'm trained as a lawyer, and that is that. I was trained as an engineer or a civil engineer. I mean, I have degrees in this, and they remain in that field. What advice would you give to such a person based on the contribution you just made and based on where you're coming?
Yeah, I think it really is. A lot of the people that we have in the company, what they studied is not what they're doing today. None of them actually is what they're doing today. And I think that's fairly common, and you'll see that in corporates. Like whatever you studied, you're probably not doing that. So you kind of have to be flexible within your own self and really follow what your passion is. I think what I find a lot, because we work with people around Africa, but we actually mostly work with people outside of the continent. And I found that there is quite a lot of titles being added a lot in Africa because of our economic situation. So I studied to be a lawyer, so I'm going to be a lawyer. There is absolutely no ways I'm going to go into logistics, because what am I doing delivering like boxes? Yet you don't understand that within that law, there is certain frameworks that can help you run a logistics company. So I think that's first is the titles. Secondly, it really is the hierarchies that I see in Africa, where you've got, there is seniors. There's very much like senior, junior. I want to say entitlement when it comes to Africa. And I really think if we can also just drop that, if we can all just realize that we are all partners within an ecosystem, and don't be afraid to cross over into other people's territories. And we need to stop being territorial. I think that's the biggest killer of anything, is that whole being territorial within every ecosystem. And we see that across the entire Africa. Once we break down those walls, it becomes much more easier to move through that room. But if constantly every move that you make is filled like a jigsaw puzzle, then the progress is just never going to happen. So I really think we need to reduce that fear that we have, because I really believe that being territorial comes with fear. And fear is created by lack of knowledge. How are you gonna know knowledge if you constantly like gatekeeping for yourself? So I really think there's quite a lot of like complexities that we kind of have to unpack, but I see it much more within Africa than I do see it within outside of Africa.
Thank you so much for those powerful contributions.
Cool.
Yeah, we listened closely. Thanks so much. Just to cross over now to Prof. Ayugatan, just to ask that, are there risks in co-creation? We've been talking about co-creation and glorifying it, projecting the positive angle. Are there risks in there? Are there downsides? And how should institutions really mitigate them if there are any? This
so
is to Prof.
much.
Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Felicia, for that. I will start by saying that the challenges of curriculum reforms have been well documented across many African countries, from Namibia, South Africa, Botswana, Ethiopia, Malawi, Uganda, etc. These are deep-seated, long-standing structural issues that run through many African educational systems, such as large-sized classes, low levels of teacher competence and motivation, which are frequently ignored in curriculum reform. And so I think there is a publication by UNICEF in 2018 entitled Busy Going Nowhere, Curriculum Reform in Eastern and Southern Africa, which demonstrates how curriculum reform in Eastern and Southern Africa has been challenging. And despite repeated attempts to reform the basic education curriculum in many countries in Eastern and Southern Africa, learning levels remain persistently low as of that time of the research anyway. So it says not only in basic education, but we can also find the same pattern in higher education. So the UNICEF Think Piece looks at the system that children busy with schoolwork, but do not prepare them for the future, like Fumi just highlighted and the other speakers. And especially when Divine said, what they learn in class is different from what they get on the field. Writing a policy briefs, getting out there to know what it is very important, rather than teaching you the policy. So curriculum reform in Africa, as like I said, do not prepare children for the future, and has faced many challenges by translating some of the theoretical frameworks, which are some sort of ambitious, like competency-based curriculum education and inclusive education, which all need a lot of resources and infrastructure. I think the SG also mentioned this in his keynote address. And I take that because seemingly we don't have that. Those are not visible. In many cases, the teacher's competence is inadequate. There are issues of limited stakeholders. There are issues of resource constraint. There are issues of institutional resistance. Sometimes we lack contextual relevance. At times we copy and adopt Western programs and curriculum and paste in our African context, and that affects a smooth running of our reforms. So we need to build our curriculum with the African context and the African philosophies. So when I look at that, I see scholar research highlights that curriculum co-creation is all about. We need to participate and we need to collaborate in designing that curriculum. It is an approach that involves, like I mentioned earlier, we need diverse stakeholders. And if the stakeholders could come in with their own ideas, and then the institutions come in with their ideas, I think there is ownership here. The industry, when they come together to offer a pathway to bridge this theory and practice divide, industries come in with a practical flank to balance the theoretical pathway from institutions or universities. When this collaboration is effectively practiced, it enhances ownership. Everybody's idea is considered. It enhances relevant inclusivity, student engagement, which leads to some kind of long-term sustainability of the reforms. So that brings me to those key principles of curriculum co-creation. And it should be inclusive stakeholders involvement. I keep talking about stakeholders because once we know what they need and we are designing and we agree together to say, this is what the future holds for us, we work towards that. There should be that kind of shared responsibility. There should be also strong institutional support with the resources, with human resource development or professional development. We need all of this. So collaboration with stakeholders should be ongoing. It shouldn't be a one-time thing, but an iterative process. It should incorporate a reflective approach So from time to time, a re-examination of the program, which means we have to look back at what we have done and as well as what still needs to be improved and take it up from there. But it should be a continuous effort. That collaboration with stakeholders should be continuous. And I still say this because at the end of the day, when we put the theoretical aspect, and most often now we've tried to include community engagement in building curriculum, but at the end of the day, where do they go to? Those factories, those industries, they need to be with our, they are the ones who are taking up these students that we have trained. So we look at African universities, should be rigorous, and that rigor should go hand in hand with other stakeholders, and there should be flexibility. Flexibility in the fact that once we know that this is what we need in the market, we are able to be flexible as far as drawing our curriculum is concerned and as far as designing it. I always say this at the beginning when I was talking, I said, this is inbuilt in your teaching philosophy. It's also inbuilt in assessment. It's also built in the design of the curriculum. Like we said, how do you manage large classes? I like when Divine said, co-creation is not about students designing the curriculum, but it is about what they need and how can their voice be heard. And even with that, once you come up with that Socratic pedagogic principles, where you give students the leeway for them to be at the center of activities, you have a discussion. From there, you will see what resonates with them, what they need to tell us. And from there, that kind of discussion, you can pick and you will see the needful at the time of disseminating that knowledge. So I think it is something that when we bring in the stakeholders, also knowing what we have, what they have for us, and once in a while have that kind of platform where the stakeholders already are there. For instance, take the econometrics. What is needed in the market? Take food security. What are we supposed to do? Are we supposed just to talk about food security and we say, oh, for food security, climate change and food security, we just need to plant organic fruits? And no, what we are supposed to do is theoretically we'll tell you the principles of food security, but when you use the community, you then understand how they go about
the practical aspect.
From the practical aspect. And then the stakeholders know that these students have been trained, but these are the kinds of discussions that they went through. And I think in some of the aspects, we see that when in some recruitment boards that I have sat, they ask for transcript and even ask for evaluations of that transcript. They want to know the practical part of the programs that you did. And those practical parts already prove that this work was not barely theoretical. You know, maybe it went
that's fine. I think it
actually
really
aspects of things that
some of the earlier points, Prof. The points that you raised about the practicality, I think is very important, which is very similar to, you know, some of the comments raised by the others. But you coming from an academic perspective, who have lived, you know, within a university community and who has been part of various boards, reiterating it and highlighting it, as well as also even telling us about various research that collaborates what you are saying. That is very, very important. I'm just trying to save some time as well so we can have a Q&A session, which will then allow our participants to engage you and to ask questions or also to generally contribute. So maybe before we do that, just one, I'll cross over to Giuseppe to, you know, give us some key remarks in terms of a forward-looking principles. If African universities were really to adopt some guiding principles for co-creating education with youth over the next decade, what should those be? Maybe briefly the next 3 minutes or so we can pick some questions. Thank you.
Absolutely. And happy to engage a lot with the audience. I think Prof has already highlighted. I would just touch on a few important points. I think the first one when we think about co-creation, when I think about it is where are we trying to create the change? So if it's in the classroom or in the lecture halls and rooms, we should really spend time there. Because that's the unit of change that we wish to be able to, see flourish. But are we spending enough time and understanding what really happens in the classroom, because I think that's the starting point if we wanted to co-create, because before you design the assessment and curriculum, really thinking about your starting point as an anchor of where we would need to focus on. And then the second one is that I think often they are blurred lines of accountability, whether it is, understanding where the decision making points are, but also the responsibilities of the different stakeholders, whether it's students or even faculty or our lecturers, right? Understanding more on the accountability and the responsibilities of our role that we can play to create that change that we want to make. So I would just kind of end on those 2 points, and happy to hear any thoughts and questions from the audience as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. At this point, we would really like to engage. And therefore, I would like to kindly ask if there are some questions. Kindly put up your hands, your electronic hands, and then I'll call you to contribute. I think we really want to hear from all of you, as many people as possible, or at least a few of you. It can be a question engaging with the keynote address or from the panel session. We do have all the dignitaries around and they will be willing to engage. I'm also conscious of time, but I think at least we want to be able to dedicate the next 15 minutes or so for that, and then we wrap up. So we are all here waiting to see the hands up so that we can hear from you as well. Okay, whilst we do that, there's a comment. Frank, please help if you can see any hand up, then you alert me. But I've seen a comment which is also contributing to the discussions. One is talking about the fact that learning from both books and real life experiences from real context is an essential way of educating and learning. Dear Fumi Koba, you have shared a very important point and perspectives. Thank you. And perspectives. Thank you for your knowledge and experiences. So thanks so much. That's to you, to me. Alice puts a contribution via the chat, but I see Alice's hand is up, so it would always be better to hear from you. Please, you have the floor. Prof. Doc, Madam Alice, you have the floor, so you can actually make your contribution.
Mute. I have been
unmuted.
To unmute?
Okay.
I've been unmuted. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Very interesting interactions. I heard about being a little knowledgeable in different areas, being more important than being an expert in one area. I now ask, are we subscribing to wanting students to be jack of all trades and master of none? Because we know at the secondary school level, where people go into either the science area or the arts area or social science specializations. Now I'm talking about being a little more knowledgeable in different skills. How do we manage that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there another question so that we can respond to 2 or 3? But otherwise, I think I can invite distinguished panelists to respond to this. We can hear from Fumi and then also from Prof. Elizabeth, because I think that contribution really came from your delivery, Fumi.
So you have to be you have to have a skill and not a jack of all trades. It's you can't dilute that much focus, but and I'll use being a fashion student as an example, which I'm not. But we've got a fashion student in the business who is a co-founder, and because she understands fashion so well and she understands, dressmaking and all of that kind of stuff, she needs to understand on how to sell that fashion. And because of that, she kind of needs to understand marketing as well as the different digital distribution channels. And if she can understand that whole flow of how to move from production up until it lands into a customer's hands. And once that customer does have that product in their hand, how do we keep them coming back? She studied fashion, but she understands what marketing means, what logistics means, what retention means, how much we get that customer for means. And that's what I mean. Like, so you don't have, she doesn't have to know what maritime means because it means nothing to her industry, but she does need to know what her purpose is, and that is to sell her clothes or her label, which means she needs to understand that entire flow of how it happens and it comes about, and not just knowing on how to make a dress. I'm just making a silly example, but that's what I mean about being able to be multidisciplinary.
Okay, Daniel's contribution to that, having multiple skills is not necessarily about being a master of all trades. It's about being sufficiently prepared and adaptable and agile to identify and seize opportunities both within and beyond one's core area of expertise. I will throw this next question to Prof. To help us respond to. When amplifying youth voices in curriculum development, how do we ensure contributions and ideas from youth are incorporated to ensure inclusive education system? Most often, youth voices are tokenistic without them participating at the table of decision making. So, Prof, that's over to you, if you can help us respond to that.
So, thank you again for the question. To queue up with Fumi, I want to say that there are times that we must not only offer degree programs, because when we insist on multidisciplinarity, yes, it's very good but it doesn't make you jack of all trade. It just make you acquire many other things alongside the programs that you're doing. So, but there must be we could also offer short courses, short certificate. And there could be programs that help students acquire specific skills that master specific competencies. It could be by distant learning, it could be crash courses, short certificates, or micro-credentials that could later build into full programs, no doubt. So for instance, if a student takes an HND, he may need just one more year to have a bachelor's degree. And also there could be flexible or modular programs which would enable students to acquire an attestation in a particular competence. We are used to training general education, but programs should be more responsive to emerging fields. Presently, there are contemporary disciplines such as climate change, digital and environmental humanities, digital marketing, renewable energy, food security, which are designed to respond to emerging fields as we are talking about labor market shifts. So this will not only ensure rigor, but flexibility. So we can always be flexible. Another way to ensure that we are flexible and respond to labor market demands is that we should incorporate 21st century skills into our programs. We should incorporate them as we teach, and this is done through the kind of teaching method that we use. Those methods that are student-centered, they incorporate 21st century skills, they incorporate critical thinking, they incorporate problem solving, they incorporate collaboration, they incorporate They incorporate leadership skills, communication skills. Those are examples of some of the skills that we are talking about, which must be incorporated as well. Also, there are ways of creating and making our programs flexible. We could create multiple pathways within a particular degree structure. We could create and blend work and study options.
Okay.
We could even introduce evening classes, online modules. There could be a major course plus an elective. So a student could earn a degree in teaching and a minor in entrepreneurship because institutions are responding to the labor market demands. So these are the kinds of multiple pathway we are talking about.
Okay.
There could be accelerated programs for learners or for working students. Another way is to deepen and enhance or reinforce industry and university collaboration.
Okay.
So that is what I would say in the course of Jack of all trades. We are not looking at Jack of all trades, but we are looking at specificity and how we can enhance the outcome, especially when we talk about co-creation.
Sure.
So we should be able to co-design in this collaboration.
Thank you. Thanks so much for those insights. We'll cross over quickly to George, and then we would have Madam Veronica as well. We only have about 3 minutes, so hopefully 1 minute each, and then we'll wrap up and end the session. Over to you, George.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everyone from Ghana. Let me commend you for the good work we've done so far, especially the facilitators. They have provided very insightful information to us relative to co-creation, which has become very important in development of education. But my question is, what level of education should co-creation be started from? Relating it to the experience in terms of maybe contributing to the development of the curriculum. Should we start from the tertiary? Should we start from the second cycle or the basic school? So that we know where we can align their experience and their involvement. So that is what I want to find out from the facilitators. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. There was another last hand up. If that person can come in. After that last speaker, I would like to cross over to Prof. Oyewele, who has reconnected to end us for the session today. Thank you so much, Prof, for staying on from beginning till now. There was a last hand up, and then maybe any final comments from him as well. Or the person maybe posted via the chat. There's a question about having the slides. Yes, we will share the slides. Okay, there's a contribution from Theodora who says that I would like to suggest that at subsequent conferences, we address the growing menace in our universities where students are expected to study while some lecturers are more focused on collecting money in exchange for grades. As a result, students who can use sort of those who can pay are no longer interested in studying seriously. I believe this is a serious issue and we need to do something about it. So just to confirm that at AAU, we do provide several platforms for such exchanges, for such knowledge exchange among our stakeholders. So we surely would have an opportunity to engage in this, how higher education is being monetized. I think that's what your contribution is about. So just to say that what we've heard today is really focusing on highlighting that co-creation is not just a single reform, but a mindset, and one that will require institutions to see youth not as beneficiaries, but as partners, and not as future leaders, but as present actors. On that note, I want to thank all of you, panelists, for joining this session and for sharing your deep thought with us. I would also like to profoundly appreciate Professor Oyewele for that high-level keynote address, and the Afrobarometer team. Your data statistics was really showing us what is happening on the ground, what are the masses saying, and that's very useful to stakeholders as higher education constituents. We undertake research, and therefore such evidence is really critical to the core of what we do. That being said, I think I would like to then hand over to SG to formally close us. I saw SG just a short while ago. Thank you. I see some hands being clapped. All right. On that note, I think we can end the session. We thank you so much for connecting. We've won the 2 hours by just 1 minute, and we thank you for staying on even beyond that 1 minute. We sincerely appreciate you. Would share the slides, would share all the key information. We are going away knowing that we are all going to continue to empower our youth in co-creating education, as that is the African imperative. Thank you. It's bye-bye from both Association of African Universities and Afrobarometer. We want to take a group photo. So would like to encourage all of us, participants, panelists, let's take one group photo before we leave. I would like to hand over to the technical team to handle this portion for us. Maybe we just plead with you to stay on for about 2 more minutes so we can have some photos for our social media platforms. Mami, can you please guide us through, or you let us know once we are okay so we can formally end this session?
Maybe we all switch our cameras on. That'll be cool.
Is Frank able to do that? If not, let's not take any more time. I think we can add the session.
Yes, I'm
say
doing
thank you
that
to our
now.
participants.
Okay, Frank, please help with that. Okay, are we okay now?
Page?
Yeah.
No, we have just one page for now. We're doing the second page. Please, we have your video up. Please smile. Very good. I need to take this photo again. I think the smiles are much better this time around. Just 1 second. Awesome. Awesome. Wow, more people are turning on their cameras. That's good. All right. Okay, so that is it. Thank you very much for being patient with me and smiling at me.
Thank you all so much. It's bye-bye from the Secretariat of the Association of African Universities. We thank you for connecting throughout, and we look forward to further communication with you. Thanks so much. Tomorrow is the main day, so we want you to celebrate it, possibly by disseminating the key learning from this session more widely within your stakeholder groups as well. Thank you. It's bye-bye from AU.
Just to add that we'll be
Afrobarometer.
sharing the presentation slides with everybody who registered and joined us. So for those of you who requested, we've taken notes of your request. You will definitely get the slides. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.